I could not believe what I had read, especially after what the International Monetary Fund had urged Zimbabwe to do just a few short years ago. Well, now they are changing their tune. I'll explain as we explore. I was amazed. I had to read it twice. I was that shocked after what I found out here by this piece from Michael Mahere about what the IMF wants Zimbabwe to do regarding their gold-backed currency, known as the Zigg. The International Monetary Fund supports the Zimbabwe gold-backed Zigg, fully becoming a national currency. Yep, you heard that right. Now, for those of you familiar with this channel, you may know that my most popular video is about the exact opposite, about what the IMF urged Zimbabwe to do to essentially get rid of gold coins in their country. That's right, crazy. Who would have ever thought that would be a sound recommendation? But nonetheless, it's what they did not too long ago. Now, for those of us, we know what gold means. We know what gold means more than what some nations do. But thankfully, Zimbabwe seems to be on the right track, at least in part. We'll get into that in a moment. First, I want to remind you, Summit Metals, you can be your own central bank and elevate your wealth with gold from Summit Metals. Check out their offerings at summitmetals.com. So this is a very interesting development in this piece here. Certainly, U.S. dollars serve as the country's primary currency, with about 80% of the country's transactions are using greenbacks. So that essentially is the biggest competitor right now to gold. And a gold-backed currency is this, the dollar. It is the top reserve currency. Of course, it makes you wonder what the motivation is for the International Monetary Fund to make this recommendation. Yes, indeed. Also known as Zimbabwe gold, the Zigg is a structured currency backed primarily by 2.5 tons of gold, along with other foreign exchange reserves, including $100 million in U.S. currency. The government introduced the gold-backed currency in an effort to stabilize the government's financial system in April of 2024. As the Zimbabwe African National Union Pacific Front explained when the currency was introduced, given that Zigg is a standard structured currency deriving its value from gold, a valuable asset, it is likely to maintain a stable value, ceteris paribus. The value of Zigg against the dollar therefore appreciates or depreciates as gold price increases or decreases at the international market. Given the stability of gold price, the Zigg is more likely to be stable in value currency. Well, in a way, that's a roundabout way to say that gold is the standard bearer. It is the gold standard. It is something that has proven itself over time and time again. No matter how strong the dollar is, and make no mistake, it is still very strong, it is losing value by design every year. That is inflation. And by the way, out-of-control inflation is anywhere above 2%, according to the Fed. 2% or below is in-control inflation. That's what they seek. It's what they desire. And so we know that the dollar has lost value, whereas the dollar has lost value, whereas gold has maintained its value throughout time. But the stability ultimately depends on the public's confidence. And even with the gold backing, Zimbabweans have been slow to adopt the currency because of a deep-seated distrust of the government's monetary mechanisms. That is completely and fully understandable for sure. That skepticism is warranted. The Zigg was the sixth government attempt to shore up the Zimbabwean currency since 2009. The Zimbabwe government introduced the Zigg at a rate of 13.56 per dollar. On September the 26th, the currency was quoted at 14 Zigg per dollar. The next day, its valuation jumped to 24.4 Zigg per dollar, a 43% devaluation. And so that is obviously a problem. Now, this history goes back to 2009. What you are looking at here are a series of the most high inflationary notes in African history and second largest inflationary notes in world history. This is the Zimbabwean $100 trillion bill that came out in 2008. And so this is an example, folks, of these inflationary currencies which have dramatically hyperinflated to such a value that one of these could almost pay the national debt off 3 times over. It used to be comfortably 3 times over, but not with $37 trillion in debt today. I got 4 of these notes here in uncirculated condition for literally dollars back in 2008 or 2009 when I got them from eBay, and now they're worth a couple $100 a piece. Just goes to show you how things change, how irony sets in, but nonetheless, the true value is gold. Gold is indeed the standard bearer, and Zimbabweans understand that now, and so, but I can understand the skepticism. The government took this step hoping to align the official exchange rate with the unofficial rate on the streets. This is one of several measures that the IMF mission chief Wojciech Malanskowski said needed to be done to boost the Zigg adoption by the public. Right now, we see a good stability in the official market, and we also see a convergence between the parallel and the official rate. Ideally, we would like it to see an elimination of this gap. We would like to see one exchange rate. Last year, Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa indicated that the government plans to phase out the multi-currency system, with the Zigg becoming the country's sole legal tender by 2030. Malanskowski said the IMF does not support additional government devaluations. He thinks the official and unofficial rates will naturally converge if the currency is supported by government fiscal discipline. That's a big if. The country has a long history of rampant inflation. The Zimbabwean dollar lost about 800% of its value against the dollar in 2023 alone. Hyperinflation totally wiped out the value of the Zimbabwean dollar in the early 2000s. In 2009, the government abandoned its currency and adopted foreign currencies, primarily the U.S. dollar, or more accurately, the Federal Reserve note, which is what this is. But the thing is the Zimbabwean dollar here, this version, the $100 trillion bill, was reset. In January of 2009, this replaced the new Zimbabwean dollar. The word new was only difference, still paper currency, and of course, we saw what happened to that Zimbabwean dollar 6 times over. The African nation reintroduced the Zimbabwe dollar, also known as the bond note, in 2016. That's several resets later. It was to be backed by the U.S. dollar loan facility. Then Central Bank Governor John Mangodia swore the new Zimbabwe dollar would remain on par with the greenback. But the bond note crashed when the government once again began printing excess money. By mid-July 2019, price inflation had increased to 175%. By the way, we're doing more of that now behind the scenes in this country. The Zigg was supposed to slam the door on the country's monetary malfeasance. Backing currency with a hard asset theoretically limits money creation. The government shouldn't create more notes unless it gets more gold. A gold standard puts a natural brake on monetary expansion. That's right, it is a limiting force. It is a way to rein in overreach in printing. That's exactly what gold does. It's a restrictive measure. But merely pegging a currency won't do the trick if the government can't resist the temptation to arbitrarily change the peg. A gold standard only works when government officials leave it alone. And as Americans learned in the 1930s, governments can and will quickly unravel a gold standard when it suits their purposes. Exactly right. Just a few months later, the Zimbabwean government was already pushing miners to produce more gold, and this would allow the government to expand the money supply. This new currency is anchored on gold production. We have to determine ways to increase production. Mines and Mining Development Minister Winston Chitando said in a meeting with miners last year. Of course, Zimbabwe is the largest miner and the second largest in Africa. Since late 2022, Zimbabwe miners have been required to pay a portion of their royalties to the state in gold. An increase in mine production will increase the country's gold supply. This would have theoretically allowed the government to increase the amount of Zigg in circulation while maintaining the current ratio of gold backing. Simply put, an increase in the gold supply amounts to inflation in that country. Yes, indeed. But of course, we have to understand the nuance here too. You're still limited by gold, the time and energy it takes to produce that gold. So yes, you may get some of that, but if you see increased economic activity and the velocity of money equate with the population, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The key to Zigg adoption might be public acceptance, but that's not the biggest challenge. The hard part is changing the mentality of politicians and bureaucrats who rely on the expansion of the money supply to support a spending and grow government. A gold standard only works as long as government officials leave it alone. It's really a natural system here. But, there's really no more about what the IMF has said about this other than they want something stable here. But they're saying, hey, pick one and stop the devaluation of your currency. The only way to do that is to go to that gold-backed Zigg. So they're not fighting it anymore like they did before. An about face from the International Monetary Fund. Amazing. So there you have it. Let me know what your thoughts are about this piece and about what Zimbabwe is doing with their gold-backed currency. And by the way, I don't know if they're still producing those gold coins or not, but boy, they were pretty cool. And I would love to get one of them. They're very hard to come by around here. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. I hope you found this video informative, insightful, and educational. I would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.